Okay, let's unpack this. Atlantis. I mean, just the name, right? It conjures up so much. Mystery, fascination, endless debate.
Absolutely. It's this legendary island kingdom swallowed by the ocean. It's captured imaginations for, well, millennia.
Yeah, and it spurred just countless theories about whether it was real, where it might have been, how it met its end.
Mm. It's really become the shorthand, hasn't it, for any kind of lost civilization, a vanished golden age.
Exactly. The allure of hidden knowledge, maybe a cautionary tale. It's all wrapped up in that one name.
But here's the really fascinating part, the paradox we want to dig into today.
Right.
How did this story, which his own author basically designed as, a lesson in
Philosophical point, yeah.
precisely, how did that become so deeply rooted in our minds as potentially, literal history?
It's wild. It shows how much we love a grand story, doesn't it? Something with mystery, grandeur, maybe a lost past.
It really does. These powerful stories can just take on a life of their own, sometimes completely separate from why they were first told.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to trace Atlantis right back to the beginning. From Plato's philosophical idea through all the layers of, well, speculation, romantic ideas, even pseudo-archaeology that it built up.
And critically try to separate what Plato intended from what the story became.
Exactly. So, how did this incredible story, this mix of fact and fiction, right from the start, get so lodged in our collective imagination as a historical fact? Where did it begin?
Well, prepare yourself, because this is one of the most crucial points. The entire story, everything we think we know about Atlantis,
Yeah,
it comes from one single source, one mind.
just one. Really?
Just one, the Greek philosopher Plato, and specifically just two of his works, the dialogues Timaeus and Critias,
Yeah.
written around 360 BCE.
Wow, okay, that's huge. So no other ancient texts mention it? No corroboration at all?
None. Zero. Just Plato. Think about that. Most ancient myths or legends like the Trojan War, you have Homer, maybe other poets, fragments here and there.
Right, different versions sometimes?
Yeah, exactly. Or Egyptian history, you've got hieroglyphs, other Greek historians writing about it. But Atlantis, it's pure Plato, a philosophical master weaving a narrative.
Okay, so if it's just Plato, we really need to understand the context he wrote it in. You said dialogues.
Yes, Socratic dialogues. Critias was actually meant to be the second part of a trilogy.
A trilogy?
Yeah, Timaeus came first, then Critias, and the third was supposed to be Hermocrates. But it seems like he maybe never finished it. Or even started it, possibly.
Huh. And Critias itself isn't complete, is it?
That's right, the ending is lost. Adds another layer of mystery, doesn't it? But the key thing is the form. These are dialogues, philosophical discussions.
They're not history books.
Not at all. Characters discussing big ideas, the universe, creation, society, human nature. The Socratic dialogue format itself signals that the goal is philosophy, exploration, maybe teaching, not just recording historical events. That's fundamental.
Got it. So it's a philosophical discussion, but Plato puts this incredible story inside it. How does he actually introduce it?
Well, this is where Plato gets incredibly clever. He uses this intricate narrative structure, like a story within a story within a story. It's designed to give the tale this immediate feeling of ancient authority.
Okay, layers. How does that work?
So the Atlantis story gets introduced during a discussion set around a festival for Athena, the Panathenea, in Athens. A big deal, celebrating Athens itself.
Sets the stage, gives it importance.
Exactly. And in the dialogue, Socrates asks three guys, Timaeus, Hermocrates, and Critias, for stories about ancient Athens, specifically how an ideal Athens might face external challenges.
Then Critias pikes up.
Critias volunteers the Atlantis story. But here's the genius part. He doesn't say he made it up, or even that Plato made it up.
No. So where does he say it came from?
He claims he heard it from his grandfather, who's also named Critias.
Okay, family history.
But wait, there's more. His grandfather, the elder Critias, supposedly heard it from Solon.
The Solon, the famous Athenian lawgiver, one of the seven sages.
The very same, a figure of immense respect and wisdom in Athens.
Okay, that adds weight. Where did Solon get it?
Solon, Critias claims, heard the whole detailed story during his travels in Egypt from Egyptian priests.
Egyptian priests, wow. They were seen as holders of ancient secret knowledge, right?
Absolutely, repositories of wisdom going back millennia. So the priests supposedly told Solon, comparing Egyptian and Athenian histories, and revealed this tale of Atlantis.
So let me trace this back. Egyptian priests tell Solon.
Who tells Dropidas, Critias' great-grandfather.
Okay.
who tells the elder Critias, the grandfather,
Right.
who then tells the younger Critias, the one actually speaking in Plato's dialogue when he was just 10 years old, and his grandfather was 90.
That is incredibly specific, down to the ages.
Isn't it? It creates this almost journalistic feel,
Yeah.
like a carefully passed down oral tradition, documented through generations, originating from this ancient authoritative source in Egypt.
It sounds so solid, so real, like a chain of evidence, but you're saying Plato likely invented this whole chain?
Well, that's the scholarly consensus. It's a masterful narrative device. Because think about it, putting this story inside a philosophical dialogue already flags it as, likely allegorical.
Right, it's not Herodotus writing history.
Exactly. But then Plato has Critias absolutely insist that the story is a very strange one. But even so, every word of it is true.
Ah, okay. So Plato himself, through the character, is claiming it's factual.
He presents it as logos, a true account, a history, not mythos, which is a myth or a fable. That distinction is crucial. Plato wants it, at least on the surface, to be taken as true within the dialogue's world.
But modern scholars mostly don't buy it as history.
Overwhelmingly, no. The consensus is that it is a myth, an allegory. Some might even say it's a kind of noble lie or a deliberate deception by Plato.
Deception, that sounds harsh for a philosopher.
Well, maybe deception isn't quite right. Think of it more as a powerful teaching tool. Rhetorical strategy. He wasn't trying to maliciously fool people about ancient geography.
Okay, so what was the goal of making it sound so real?
By embedding his philosophical points within this seemingly ancient, factual story, passed down by revered figures like Solon and Egyptian priests, he gave those points incredible weight.
Made them hit harder?
Exactly. It made his critique of contemporary Athens, his ideas about ideal states and moral decay, feel urgent, grounded in something seemingly real and ancient, less abstract, more relatable.
So the truth claim was part of the philosophical package deal.
Precisely. It's this blurring of lines presenting allegory as history that's key to why Atlantis became so powerful and why people still argue about whether it was real. Plato basically built the perfect foundation for future belief, maybe unintentionally.
Are there clues within the story itself that hint it might not be literal history, like internal inconsistencies?
Oh, definitely. Scholars point these out. For instance, that chain of transmission sounds great, but the time gap between Solon, who lived centuries earlier, and the Critias speaking in the dialogue is, well, it's a stretch for perfect oral recall across generations.
Right, details get lost or changed.
And Plato, through Critias, even admits to sort of condensing things, adjusting the timeline a bit for the story's sake.
Ah, so Plato acknowledges he's shaping the narrative.
He does, subtly. It's a signal that narrative purpose might be trumping strict historical accuracy. But again, framing it with Solon in Egypt gives it that illusion of deep history. It was a strategic choice, making the moral lesson more persuasive by wrapping it in apparent ancient wisdom. That's why it stuck.
Okay, so let's get into the story Plato told. What was this Atlantis actually like? You said he gave details.
Oh, incredible detail. It wasn't just a name on a map. He painted this vivid picture. First, location. An island, a huge one, out in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the Pillars of Hercules.
Which we usually take to mean the Strait of Gibraltar, right? Out past the known Mediterranean world.
Exactly. Edgy, mysterious, and the size, enormous. Plato says larger than Libya and Asia combined.
Whoa, Libya and Asia Minor, basically. That's gigantic for a Greek perspective.
Huge. And the landscape wasn't just wild. It had intricate canals, a massive central plain that was irrigated, abundant resources.
And the city itself.
Meticulously designed. Concentric rings, circular zones of land and water alternating, like giant moats separating rings of land.
That sounds incredibly engineered.
It does, all connected by a central canal leading to the sea. And at the very heart, a magnificent palace complex and a grand temple to Poseidon, the sea god.
Poseidon again. Makes sense for an island nation. What else? Was it wealthy?
Immensely prosperous. Rich soil, apparently yielding 2 harvests a year. Advanced engineering, you can tell from the canals and harbors. Extravagant buildings, baths, big harbor installations, military barracks.
So sophisticated, organized.
Very. And the wealth staggering. Gold, silver everywhere. Exotic wildlife, plentiful food. And he mentions this legendary metal, orichalcum.
Orichalcum, what's that?
Described as fiery, reddish, maybe a natural alloy like brass or bronze. But Plato says it's incredibly valuable, second only to gold, dug from the earth. Just adds to this image of almost mythical abundance and mastery over nature.
It sounds like a paradise almost. Too good to be true.
Well, that's exactly the point Plato is building towards. All this incredible detail, the splendor, the power, it's not just description for its own sake.
It serves the story.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
builds up the grandeur to make the eventual fall much more shocking, much more meaningful. It's setting the stage for a tragedy.
Okay, so how did this civilization start, according to Plato? And what were the people like initially?
According to the story, Atlantis was founded by Poseidon himself.
The god.
Yes, he fell for a mortal woman on the island, Plato. He settled her on a hill, surrounded it with those rings of land and water for protection, and they had children, 5 sets of twin sons.
10 sons. Divine human hybrids.
Exactly, establishing this royal lineage. And initially, Plato portrays the Atlanteans and their kings as virtuous, noble, wise. They had high moral standards, respected the laws laid down by Poseidon, governed justly.
Sounds pretty ideal.
It was, at first. They had this system with multiple kings ruling different parts, but bound by common rules. Decisions about war, for instance, needed collective agreement. And clearly, with the harbors and mentions of their military, they were a major naval power.
So, powerful, organized, initially virtuous. What went wrong? This is the fall from grace part.
Precisely. Over generations, as the divine part of their ancestry got diluted by marrying mortals, their character changed. The human side, with its flaws, took over.
How so?
Greed, lust for power. Plato says they became filled with unrighteous avarice and power. Their moral fiber just eroded. They lost their fairness of temper, became obsessed with wealth and conquest.
Ah, the classic corruption arc.
Totally. And this inner corruption led to outer aggression. They became this formidable military force and started trying to conquer everyone around the Mediterranean. They basically became imperialistic.
Setting their sights on Greece.
Eventually, yes. Plato explicitly calls Atlantis an aggressive barbarian civilization. He sets them up as the clear antagonist, the opposite of his idealized ancient Athens.
Okay, so the mighty empire, corrupted from within, turns aggressive. It feels like a collision course is inevitable. How does it end?
It ends dramatically. First, there's the war. The Atlanteans invade, trying to conquer Athens and other parts of the Mediterranean.
And Athens fights back.
Yes. And according to Plato's story, the ancient Athenians who represent his ideal state, virtuous, just, moderate, they actually defeat the massive Atlantean forces. They repel the invasion.
Wow. The virtuous underdog wins against the corrupt superpower. Very pointed message there.
Extremely pointed. But that's not the end for Atlantis. The gods get involved. Specifically, Zeus, king of the gods.
He wasn't happy.
Not at all. He sees their arrogance, their hubris, their moral decay, their aggression, and decides to act. He gathers the other gods, lays out the situation, and decrees a punishment.
Which is?
Utter destruction. Plato says Zeus unleashed violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single terrible day and night, the entire island of Atlantis sank beneath the sea, wiped out.
In a single day and night of misfortune. That's the famous line. Just gone.
Gone. Complete annihilation. Divine retribution on a massive scale.
Could Plato have been inspired by real events like that Santorini eruption?
It's very possible. That eruption around 1600 BCE was catastrophic for the Minoans. It certainly involved earthquakes, tsunamis, ash, a sudden devastating event. Memories of something like that could easily have filtered down and influenced Plato's description.
But he scaled it up massively for his story.
Oh, absolutely. He took a possible historical echo and amplified it into this epic allegorical cataclysm to serve his philosophical purpose.
Which goes back to the details. The initial splendor makes the end more impactful.
Precisely. That whole setup, the divine origin, the initial virtue, the incredible wealth and power, the sophisticated engineering, it's all there to make the moral decay and the final destruction hit harder. It's a perfect illustration of hubris leading to downfall.
That classic Greek theme.
Exactly. It shows that even the greatest power, if it loses its moral compass, faces inevitable ruin. It's a lesson about the importance of virtue for a state, a warning against unchecked ambition. It's Plato's miniature utopia failing because of his own flaws.
So it's clear the story wasn't just entertainment, it was packed with meaning. Why did Plato feel the need to tell this specific story, though? What was he really getting at?
Fundamentally, as we've said, it's a fictional parable. It's designed to show how a miniature utopia failed. The core purpose is a lesson about the proper behavior of a state.
Okay, a lesson in political philosophy, basically.
Yes, dramatized.
Yeah.
It illustrates the dangers of power, greed, moral decline in a really vivid way. The detailed description isn't history. It's the backdrop for this philosophical drama.
So how did he use Atlantis specifically to get these ideas across? What were the key themes he was exploring through it?
Well, he uses Atlantis as the perfect antagonist. It's the embodiment of everything his ideal state. Ancient Athens in the story is not.
A contrast.
A stark contrast. Think about the conflicts he sets up. Wealth versus modesty. An aggressive, seafaring empire versus a self-sufficient defensive land power. Engineering and materialism versus spiritual strength and justice.
Okay, so it highlights these opposing values.
Exactly. It becomes this powerful cautionary tale. Don't be like Atlantis. Avoid their path of moral decay. Avoid their hubris.
Hubris again, that seems central.
Absolutely central to Greek thought. Extreme pride, arrogance, especially defying the gods or moral order, it always leads to a fall. Atlantis is the poster child for hubris in Plato's narrative.
You mentioned earlier it might be a critique of Athens itself, Plato's own city.
Yes, many scholars believe it's not just about some mythical past, but a parable aimed squarely at contemporary Athens, particularly Athens in the 5th century BCE, after the Peloponnesian War.
When Athens had its own empire and maybe was seen as getting a bit too arrogant or corrupt.
Precisely. Plato lived through that period of Athenian decline, the loss of the war, the internal strife. So Atlantis, this aggressive, wealthy naval power that overreaches and falls, it could be seen as a warning to Athens.
Or maybe a reflection of other powers Athens faced, like Persia.
That's another interpretation. Persia, or maybe even Carthage, powerful, wealthy imperial rivals. By creating Atlantis and having his idealized Athens defeat it, Plato could be subtly criticizing these real-world powers and holding up a mirror to Athens itself, showing them the dangers of following a similar path.
It's layered, isn't it? Political commentary wrapped in myth.
Deeply layered. And that brings us back to the logos versus mythos thing. Plato calling it logos, a true account.
Right, insisting it's factual.
That insistence is what makes the critique so potent. If he just said, here's a fairy tale about a bad city, people could dismiss him. But by saying, this is a true story from ancient times passed down by Solon.
It forces the audience to engage with it more seriously.
Exactly. It leverages that respect for history and ancient wisdom. It makes the philosophical argument feel grounded, urgent, almost undeniable within the context he creates. It was a brilliant, if perhaps tricky, rhetorical move.
A pedagogical tool, like you said. Not meant to fool people about geography, but to make them think harder about politics and morality.
That's the idea. It blurs the lines to make the message resonate more deeply. His goal was philosophical teaching, using the most effective narrative tools he could devise.
Can we just quickly map out that contrast again? Atlantis versus ideal Athens, just the key points.
Origin, Atlantis is divine human, Poseidon, Cleito, becoming corrupt. Ideal Athens is human, built on reason and justice, core values. Atlantis ends up valuing wealth, greed, hubris. Ideal Athens values modesty, virtue, justice, politics. Atlantis becomes an imperialistic, conquering naval power. Ideal Athens is defensive, just, disciplined. Fate, Atlantis is destroyed by divine punishment. Ideal Athens triumphs and endures as the model.
Okay, that makes the intended lesson really clear. Atlantis is the cautionary tale, Athens is the ideal.
Exactly. It's a philosophical setup using a narrative framework.
So, if Plato's intention seems pretty clear to scholars now, allegory, lesson, critique, how on earth did we get from that to the popular image today? The literal lost city, maybe with crystals and flying machines. How did the shift happen?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It seems even in ancient times, and certainly through the Middle Ages and Renaissance right up to the early 20th century, people often read Plato quite literally.
They took Critias at his word. Then it was true.
Many did, or at least debated it as potentially true. And Plato himself kind of left the door open, didn't he? By being a bit vague on the exact time and location.
Beyond the Pillars of Hercules. That's pretty broad.
Exactly. It's specific enough to sound real, but vague enough to allow for endless speculation. That vagueness became a kind of gateway, as some call it, for all sorts of theories, moving it away from allegory toward a historical puzzle to be solved.
So where did people start looking? If it's beyond Gibraltar, did they look in the Atlantic?
Logically, yes. But interestingly, many early theories, still focused within the Mediterranean, may be influenced by the Egyptian connection in the story, or trying to link it to known islands or events.
Like the Thera eruption we mentioned, Santorini.
That's probably the most popular and academically plausible inspiration. The idea that Plato heard garbled accounts of that Minoan catastrophe, the island blowing up, tsunamis, Akrotiri buried.
A single day and night of misfortune.
Precisely. It fits that part of the narrative well. So many scholars think Thera is the likely historical kernel, the inspiration for the cataclysm part of Plato's story. But Thera doesn't match the size, the location, the detailed city plan Plato described.
So it's an inspiration, not a direct match. What other theories are out there?
Oh, loads. Some connected to the Black Sea flood theory, a massive flooding event thousands of years ago. Others have suggested almost every island in the Mediterranean or Atlantic Sicily, Malta, Sardinia, Cyprus, Crete itself, the Azores, Canaries, Cape Verde.
Malta. You mentioned potential underwater structures there.
Yeah, there's some bathymetric data, sonar readings, that some interpret as showing submerged man-made structures, maybe walls or foundations, at depths that could align with lower sea levels thousands of years ago. It's intriguing, but far from conclusive proof of Atlantis.
And then there are the more out there locations.
Definitely. People have seriously proposed Antarctica under the ice.
Yeah.
South America, like in the Andes near Lake Titicaca, Ireland, Scandinavia, Spain, off the coast of Morocco, even linked to other mythical lost continents like Mu or Lemuria in the Pacific.
Wow. It's like a Rorschach test for lost civilizations. People see it wherever they want.
Pretty much.
Uh-huh.
And then you get the more metaphorical interpretations to Atlantis' inner knowledge, or representing brain hemispheres, with the Pillars of Hercules being the corpus callosum.
Okay, that's taking it pretty far from Plato's text.
And way beyond. But it shows how flexible the symbol has become.
So how does this connect to the Atlantis we see in movies and books now? This sort of high-tech, maybe peaceful utopia?
Well, popular culture has really run with it, and often completely changed Plato's original intent. It's frequently shown as this super advanced, often peaceful utopia.
Which is the opposite of Plato's aggressive, corrupt empire.
Exactly. Or it's given futuristic technology crystals, flying machines, energy weapons, which is nowhere in Plato. He describes a Bronze Age civilization, albeit a very rich and well-engineered one.
And the Bermuda Triangle connection.
Pure modern myth-making.
Yeah.
Zero connection to Plato or any ancient source. It's just layering mysteries onto mysteries.
So why does that version persist, the advanced utopia version?
I think it taps into modern desires and anxieties. We're fascinated by technology, by the idea of a lost golden age of wisdom or advancement. It becomes this sort of escapist fantasy.
And it's influenced actual literature and art.
Hugely. Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea has Captain Nemo visiting the ruins. Thomas More's Utopia, while different, echoes the idea of an isolated, ideal society. Think in countless films, games, comics, Disney's Atlantis. The Lost Empire is a great example of the high-tech, rediscovered version.
So Plato gave us the framework.
A powerful framework. Lost civilization, catastrophe, moral lesson. But the vagueness and the lost nature made it this incredibly adaptable symbol. Later ages projected their own fascinations onto it. Scientific progress, spiritualism, utopian dreams, fears of catastrophe.
So it shifted from a moral warning about hubris to something else entirely.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
It became a symbol of lost knowledge, advanced technology, a romanticized past. That adaptability is why it's still so resonant. The story changed to reflect what later societies cared about. It's a fascinating case study in how myths evolve.
Okay, so we have Plato's original allegory and then this massive overlay of speculation and pop culture reinvention. Where does that leave serious scholars today? What's the academic bottom line on Atlantis? Is anyone really looking for it?
Well, the overwhelming academic consensus among classicists who study Plato, historians, archaeologists, is pretty clear-cut.
And that is
That Atlantis is fictional, a construct. It's a myth, a philosophical allegory created by Plato to make points about politics and morality, probably related to his ideas in the Republic about how states rise and fall.
so not a historical account.
Definitely not. It's seen as a vehicle for Plato's philosophy, a brilliant one, but still a vehicle.
And the evidence, or lack thereof.
That's the core issue for anyone claiming it was real. First, Plato's the only ancient source. If a civilization that massive existed, waged war across the Mediterranean, and then vanished catastrophically, you'd expect someone else to have mentioned it. Another historian, poet, maybe Egyptian records. But there's nothing. Silence.
No archaeological evidence either.
None that matches Plato's description. No ruins of a city with concentric rings of land and water. No evidence of orichalcum. No site larger than Libya and Asia beyond Gibraltar. People have looked, believe me. But nothing fits.
Even the places sometimes proposed, like Thera.
Thera works as an inspiration for the disaster part, perhaps. But the place itself doesn't match Plato's Atlantis in scale, location, or culture. Every attempt to find a real-world match just fails on the specifics Plato provided.
And the internal issues in Plato's story.
Those add to the skepticism. The huge time gaps in the supposed transmission. Plato's own admission of condensing history. It points towards narrative construction, not factual reporting.
What about about geology? Could a continent sink that fast?
Mainstream geology says basically no. The idea of a large landmass suddenly sinking in the Atlantic in a single day and night just doesn't fit with how geological processes are understood to work. Plate tectonics, erosion, subsidence happen over vast timescales. Uniformitarianism, the idea that the same slow processes we see today shape the past, is the standard view. Catastrophic sinking on that scale isn't supported by any geological evidence.
So science, history, textual analysis, it all points to fiction.
Pretty much across the board, yes.
Yet the belief persists so strongly for some. Is that where pseudo-archaeology takes over?
Exactly. Because there's no solid evidence. But the story is so compelling, it creates a vacuum that pseudo-archaeology rushes in to fill.
How does pseudo-archaeology work differently from regular archaeology?
The key difference is the method. Real archaeology gathers evidence, then develops and tests hypotheses based on that evidence. Pseudo-archaeology often starts with the conclusion Atlantis was real and influenced ancient Egypt, and then cherry-picks or misinterprets evidence to fit that conclusion.
Confirmation bias, basically.
On a grand scale, often driven by ideology, nationalism, New Age beliefs, or just wanting a sensational story. They might ignore contradictory evidence or make huge leaps based on superficial similarities.
Like the generalized cultural comparisons you mentioned.
Right, pointing at pyramids in Egypt and pyramids in Mexico and saying, see? They're similar, so they must have a common source like Atlantis, while ignoring the vast differences in time, culture, construction techniques, and purpose. It ignores independent invention and cultural evolution.
Are there specific sites often targeted by this kind of thinking?
Oh yes, places like Pumapunku or Tiwanaku in Bolivia, with their incredibly precise stonework, are often claimed as Atlantean or alien influenced. The Bosnian pyramids, which most geologists see as natural formations, ancient sites worldwide get reinterpreted through this lens, unfortunately obscuring the real achievements of the actual cultures that built them.
So it's a fundamental difference in approach. Plato calls it logos, truth. Modern scholarship, based on evidence, calls it mythos, allegory. And pseudo-archaeology tries to force it back into being logos, but without the evidence.
That sums it up pretty well. Plato's blurring of the lines was a philosophical technique. Modern scholarship requires empirical proof, which is absent. Pseudo-archaeology ignores the need for proof in favor of belief. It highlights the importance of critical thinking and rigorous methodology when we look at the past. The truth of Atlantis, academically speaking, isn't about a physical place, but about its power as an idea and a story.
So when we wrap this all up, the story of Atlantis, born entirely from Plato's mind, is just this incredible example of how powerful a narrative can be, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a philosophical tool and a cultural archetype all rolled into one.
A mirror for Plato to talk about states and human nature, but also this legend that just keeps echoing down through the centuries. It's this fascinating mix of, well, asserted fact and obvious fiction, right from its core.
And its real significance today isn't about finding a sunken city. It's about the symbols it carries.
Like what? What does it still represent for us?
Well, the dream of utopia, for one,
Yeah.
but also the warning about power, greed, hubris that's timeless, the whole cycle of rise and fall. It's incredibly adaptable. People use it to talk about environmental issues, politics, technology.
Which raises a really interesting final thought, doesn't it? What can we learn from a story that we know isn't literally true?
A huge amount, I think. It prompts us to look at our own societies, our own actions. Are we heading towards our own Atlantis moment through hubris or unsustainable practices? It can inform how we think about governance, maybe even urban planning or environmental policy. The themes of societal structure and collapse are right there.
And it keeps inspiring creativity, too.
Immensely. Art, literature, film. It's a framework for exploring big ideas about civilization, history, humanity's potential, and its pitfalls.
So the final takeaway might be that while the physical city of Atlantis will almost certainly never be found,
His story is perpetually found, constantly rediscovered and reinterpreted in our collective imagination, in our philosophical debates.
it's a mirror, like you said, reflecting our ideals, our flaws, our ongoing struggle to figure out how society should work, and the dangers of forgetting the lessons of hubris. The fact we're still talking about it thousands of years later says it all, really.
It really does. Its power lies in the questions it forces us to ask about ourselves.